Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Omari Martin, Board Chair of KeplerCollege of Astrological Arts and Sciences, and welcome you to our Black History Month interview series. And we have Dr. Ron Tiggle with us today, and I just want to share some information with you about his background. So Dr. Tiggle worked as a research psychologist for several federal agencies, to include the Department of Defense and the Centers for Disease Control, conducting research in organizational and health psychology from 1983 to 2007. He is a former research director for the International Society for Astrological Research. He held that position from the late 70s until 1984, and he has been practicing astrology professionally since 1974. Contributing to Astrological Research Methods, Volume 1, he has also published research in a traditional scholarly written peer-reviewed journal called the Psychology Journal, providing validating evidence for astrology. He is certified as a professional astrologer by the Professional Astrologers Incorporated. That took place in 1974, and is also a member of the Organization for Professional Astrology, the National Council for Geocosmic Research, and is a lifetime member of ESAR and the American Federation of Astrologers. And over the years, he has taught introductory and intermediate classes on astrology, and he also teaches classes on a meditation technique known as the Rainbow Bridge meditation. And so with that, let's welcome Dr. Ron Tiggle. So it is a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to interview you today. And I just want to share with everyone, Ron was the first astrologer who ever looked at my chart and I had a consultation with. And this was back in the 90s. So it's just an honor and a joy for me to have this opportunity to interview him for Kepler College's Black History Month interview series. So of course, Ron, I have a few questions for you, and I'm going to ask, how did you get started as an astrologer?
Well, it started when I was an undergraduate student at Howard. I had my chart done by a computer. It was a mainframe computer. And it was, I think it was a company called Time Patterns Research. And I was so impressed with that I decided that I would begin to study it. And I lived in Washington, D.C. at the time. And so the AFA headquarters was located there. And they were located at that time at 6 Library Courts in Georgetown. And so I wandered in one day, and I think the first time I came there, I think Paul Grell was still the executive secretary. And then after that, Robert Cooper and his wife, Sarah Cooper, were there. Robert Cooper became the executive. So I met them both. And when I went there, they immediately turned me on to all of the good books. In those days, it was CEO Carter's books, Charles Carter and Dane Rudyard. And then another book, I guess I started with, well, a popular one during the early, actually, it was in the late 60s, was A to Z Horoscope Maker. Yes. And then later I got a book by, oh, gee, what's the name of that book? It's called, it was a British author. She was the director of she was a principal of the Faculty of Astrological Studies, the modern textbook of astrology. That was important too.
Yes, I have that book. What's her name? Martha something. I know the book. I know what you're talking about. Because she also did. There's the first part of the book and there's the second part of
yes, the second part of the book is called Applied Astrology.
Yes,
which was very useful book.
Okay.
So, and that got me started. And then I guess before I even got to the AFA headquarters, I think I ordered the book online or from a bookstore. It was called Grant Lewis' book, Heaven Knows What.
Yes, 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 yes.
And so that got me started. And then I began to explore astrology. And I found that the more I began to study its principles and began to test it, that I was able to learn more and more about people. I said, wow, this is fantastic. And so one of the things that really impressed me was that you didn't have to be psychic to be an astrologer.
No, you don't.
Uh, the You just follow the rules, and you can learn so much. In fact, I concluded that it was one of the best tools I'd come across to learn about yourself. You know, it's very important for us to know thyself. We're all
Ah,
the philosophers have always talked about that. Now, the
mhm.
other thing I did before I actually studied astrology, I studied numerology, and to this day, I use them both. In fact, the first uh, article that I published in the AFA Bulletin back in 1973 was on astronumerology.
Oh, okay, cool.
uh, I wish that publication would go away. I was, you know, we were, you know, I was in my early 20s, and so we've learned a lot since then.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
put it that way. But it was
Fair enough, fair enough.
kind of them to publish that for a budding, enthusiastic new student. Um, so to this day, I still like to use numerology with the astrology because the thing that I have learned is that with numerology, a person always knows uh, their name, but with astrology, sometimes their birth time may be a little off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I find that the two correlate very well.
Okay, okay, excellent. Um, I have a few numerology books now. I'll look for myself, but I don't offer it as a professional service. And I have heard from a few other astrologers the very thing that you've stated, that they work together very well.
Yes,
And that's great. So so in your intro, in your bio, you do share that you've been practicing professionally since 1974. And so you started in Washington, D.C. I take it you have practiced in other cities as well.
that's true. Actually, the first astrological course that I taught was in Oklahoma City while I was still an officer in the Air Force. I was stationed in Oklahoma City. I was stationed actually at a place called Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma. And on the
Okay.
weekends, I would go to Oklahoma City and teach this class at a New Age center. And
Mm,
I started teaching that in I think that was like 1972.
mm,
Yes. Yeah. So
okay.
yeah. So I began doing that. So and in that class, the book I used Isabel Hickey's book as well as Mark Evan Jones' basic books.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
Isabel
Yeah.
Hickey was a strong influence too. I met her and like really liked her book a lot. So
Oh, wow. Yes. Her book, Astrology, A Cosmic Science,
that's
is
true.
one of my very first books.
Hmm.
And how fortunate you are to have met her.
Yes, yes,
Okay, so knowing, sharing with us that your journey in astrology started in the early 70s as an undergraduate student at our beloved alma mater, Howard
yes,
University, the
yes.
premier HBCU.
That's true.
Um, were you able to find access to courses when you were learning astrology? So you just shared with us you did teach an astrology class when you
Yes.
were stationed in the Air Force in 1972.
And
But what about prior to that?
well, and I also taught classes in California when I
Oh,
was a graduate student in LA and also in
okay.
Long Beach,
Okay,
California
got
too.
it. Okay.
Yeah, later.
Okay. And was it easy for you to find courses that other astrologers taught?
Okay. Well, I studied with Barbara Waters for a while, and it was kind of an informal little get together that she would have. Barbara Waters was a well-known astrologer in Washington, D.C. I guess I studied with her. It was in the early 70s. So,
Okay, okay.
um, and she was an important influence because it was through Barbara Waters that I learned about the books of Edward Jontro.
Ah,
And unfortunately, I didn't really get into those books until many years later.
okay.
His writing is fairly technical because
Hmm.
he was a physicist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
But
Wow.
most of my out besides studying with Barbara Waters, I then most of it I would pick up on my own and through attending various lectures and occasionally an astrological conference.
Okay. Okay. Now, at that time when attending those various lectures or classes, and to include attending an astrology conference, did you feel welcome as a Black man?
Well, in the early days, there weren't too many Black people around at those conferences. In fact, I usually was about the only one a lot of
Mm,
times. Uh, and and even when actually when I was the research director ESAR, which is back in the 70s, mid 70s, I think I was the only one there, the only Black person in the group.
mm.
Now, I had some interesting experiences while I was there because we used to meet at Zip Dobbins' home.
Really? You knew Zip Dobbins?
Yeah, in fact, I knew Lois too. Lois, I took my professional exam. She was my examiner. I took it at her home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so yes. And now, while I was the research director, I was fortunate to meet Michelle and Francois Gauguin. And
Oh,
I
you knew
actually,
all of the greats.
and I was a graduate student at that time at Cal State Long Beach. This was before I got my PhD because after I graduated from there, I went to UCLA. So I managed to have a colloquium at Cal State Long Beach for Michel Gauguin to talk about astrology, his research on astrology.
And this was
So
in the
that was
early
a real
70s?
highlight there for me.
Yeah, that's a
Yes,
significant, that's huge. That's
that
huge.
was huge.
And I just want to say thank you for sharing that with us, because who knew?
That's true.
And to know that this occurred in the early 70s, that's significant. And of course, we know the names Michelle and Francois Gauquelin. I know those names,
Yes.
but oh wow, thank you for letting us know that. That's significant. So I just have to ask, while that was the outcome, share some details with us, if you will, about the process, like when you first presented that to university officials. What was the response? What did they say? What were some of their
Well,
concerns?
California was always known to be fairly liberal and
Oh,
progressive. And I
right,
happened to
right.
be working with a professor, Marty Fiebert, who was open. And so they were willing to listen to him. After all, Michel Gauguin was another psychologist. He went to the Sorbonne. So they
Okay.
were interested in hearing what he had to say.
Oh, so it was the intro. Oh, wow. That is that's excellent. Wow. And huge, and certainly significant history for astrologers, and of course a part of your own personal history and legacy as a professional astrologer. I also want to ask, well, you touched on it, and you say you were like the only Black person there. So did you ever even hear of any other Black people who were astrologers at the time?
Let me see. I'm trying to remember. I would have remembered them if I knew of any,
Okay, okay, fair enough, fair enough.
but I don't remember meeting any at the,
You don't
yeah, at
remember
the
meeting
time.
any.
Right. Yeah,
Wow.
I'm trying to
Okay,
remember. Um,
okay. So I want to ask, what kind of support did you have when you decided to go into astrology, like, from your family or friends? Did they
well,
support
my
you?
family were very traditional people, and they wondered what planet their son had come from. You know, they didn't relate to that at all. I when I was in my late teens, I began to develop an interest in metaphysics, and that just kind of came from within me, probably some past life thing. That
Hmm.
I just had an interest in yoga and metaphysics and various things of that nature. So I was just curious about that. Always been a
Curious.
very curious person.
Okay, okay, that's fair. That's
Always
fair.
asked a lot of questions about things. I'm still asking questions.
Excellent, excellent. And that inquiry, that continued, if not perpetual inquiry, I think is so important. And I think it helps to just lead to, more research, if you will, to help fill in some of those knowledge gaps that exist. And over time, it expands that frontier of knowledge that exists. So I think that continuous inquiry is so important for not just astrology, but any discipline, that exists and that we pursue as professionals.
Uh,
Let's see.
That's right. In fact, I'm still asking questions, and that brings me to this my last little presentation at Kepler. I asked a question one day because I knew that there were two different ways to calculate progress charts. So I asked the very simple question: which one of these two techniques are more accurate, and why? And apparently, I don't know of anyone else who had done that because I've never seen any other articles on it.
I will say, so when you shared that with me, I did see the difference. And when you shared that with me, I shared that with a friend of mine who I took my first astrology class with. That's where her and I met, and that's where we became friends.
Mhm.
And the way life would have it, maybe we talked maybe that November, and her mother had made her transition that previous September. And I let her know I talked to you. She already knew who you were because, I let people know who you are when I
Mhm.
have a conversation to talk about astrology and Black astrologers. And I let her know about the Bija method. And she said, Omari, would you run my mother's chart and progress the moon with the Bija method? Or no, her chart, because she definitely knew her time of birth. And I said, fine, no problem. I did that. I sent it to her, and it showed up that there would be some issues around that time with her mother based on the Bija method and based on the method, if I remember correctly, where we use 365 days to represent 1 year instead of 366.1424686889. I think that's the number you gave me.
Okay, it was
When
close.
you use that latter number,
Right.
it's accurate. And so I want to, thank you for verifying or continuing the work of Jandro and doing the research to validate that for astrologers and allowing us to refine, if you will, the tools we work with to provide better or more precise information for our clients and students. So thank you. That's a huge contribution, I think, to the astrology community. And again, thank you for extending that research. And I think that's also a part of your legacy as well.
Yes.
Yes, and thank you for that presenting that fractal theory lecture to Kepler College. Thank you.
Very happy to do
Let's
that.
see. Let's see. So I just want to, you say you started with astrology in the early 70s, but Ron, you lived through the civil rights movement. I hadn't been born yet. Um, did did you ever, once you became more familiar with astrology, did you ever look at the civil rights movement through the lens of astrology
You know,
in the early 70s?
I didn't really do that. No, not
Okay.
I didn't know. I didn't look at it through the lens of astrology.
Okay, okay. I was just wondering. I was just wondering. That's out of curiosity.
Right.
And so let's see. So what kinds of changes, if any, have you experienced in the course of your career in terms of feeling welcome in groups of different diversity and cultures?
Well, I think that certainly as time has gone on, people are more inclusive now, with the exception of the period that former President Trump was in office. He seemed to have awakened some latent issues that haven't been resolved in our country. So,
Mhm.
um, but of course, I was in California for much of my time, and they just tend to be more progressive. But that was my experience.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're even the leader of the pack when it came to organic food certifications
Yes,
and
yes.
standards and all that other good stuff.
Although I
Um,
although I did move back to the East Coast
okay.
back in the 80s and Washington, D.C. area.
Hmm.
So, um, well, you know
Okay.
how DC is. So
Yes, I know how DC is. And I remember when we met, you lived in Mitchellville, Maryland.
that's true.
Hmm. Hmm. So culturally, have you noticed that African Americans tend to be more open or closed to astrology?
To astrology? Oh,
Yes.
yes.
And do you think
I had,
religion plays a part of that?
I think religion does influence a lot of African Americans. Some of them are, of course, as people begin to think for themselves, they tend to be more open.
Mm,
My approach to astrology, because I got into astrology at the height of my devotion to the world of science, and I was very much the little scientist in my early 20s, because I was a chemistry major. I started off as a physics major, and then in my sophomore year I switched to chemistry, which I got my first degree in. I have
okay.
a and so my approach was to be an empiricist, to just look at it, draw no conclusions, and see what the data shows.
Mm.
And the more I dug into it, I said, this stuff is really working. and, and I was learning quite a bit about me and about my friends. And
Hmm.
then I started working the charts. I was in my 20s. So what do young men do? They like to go out and date and look at the chart to see when is a good day to meet people. And
Yeah, that's right. And if you meet someone you like, are the two of you compatible?
yes, and I I had a reading with one of the co-founders of the AFA, Catherine Grant. Catherine Ernest
Oh,
Grant, one of the co-founders.
yes. Yeah,
And so
the wife of Ernest.
I
Yeah.
decided to see what a real professional astrologer, and this was very early on, uh,
Hmm.
would do. And so she did a reading for me. She turned me on to diurnal charts, and so I
Oh,
used to do diurnal charts and see how they worked with my transits at that time. And I found that they can work magic for you. I won't
really?
go into
Okay.
any details here.
So I'm gonna call you later tonight. I
Uh,
need some of that magic.
Speaking of diurnal charts, one of the insights I had as a result of looking into fractal theory was the fact that now that now that we know how to calculate uh, secondary progressions and solar arc directions correctly, that uh, we can extend this to transits, to daily solar arcs, by just simply taking the distance between the transient sun and, of course, the natal planet. You can add that arc
Oh, wow.
to it, and that might add another uh, piece of data. to
Another
your
piece
friends.
of
I'm,
data.
I'm
Oh,
planning on
wow.
experimenting with that just to see
Yeah,
how things
that's
would work.
okay.
Because what that would tend to show you is like a yearly energy pattern.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. I'm fascinated. My mind is going. I wanna try some of this. I want to try some of this. Um okay. So what what message of inspiration would you like to share with new and upcoming astrologers of color?
Well, gee, what can I say? Of color, of color. Well, um, I think we should have an open mind. Now, when you say, uh, give me a context so I can.
Well, African Americans who are thinking about studying astrology and, practicing it professionally.
Well, I think that it's a great opportunity and certainly you can learn a lot. I think that people are open to it. I tend not to focus on the race as much because I find in my own personal experience, actually most of my clients over the years have been white,
Mhm,
other races. I'm getting more black now. I have a lot more black clients now in more recent years. But when I
mhm,
first started, uh, they were almost all white, particularly when I was in
mm,
California.
mhm,
And what got started was there was a bookstore in Long Beach called the Mercury Bookstore, and the owner of that bookstore um, would refer a lot of clients to me,
mm.
and that's how I got started while I was a graduate
Wow.
student there. Um, and so, it just spreads through word of mouth. I think that they shouldn't really even be that concerned about the race factor
Mhm,
because if you tend to focus on that, that can create some issues for you.
mhm.
I never really focused on it as much. I knew that, yeah, I'm black. You look in the mirror, you can see that. Okay. So, but but that has nothing to do with astrology.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, when we look at a natal chart without someone telling you or you actually knowing, you would not know if it's a male, female, black, white. Um, you would not know, or even if it's a human being at all, it could be an event.
That's true.
And
That's true.
so without being told those additional details when you're looking at a chart, you would not know.
That's true. And I'm a student of metaphysics. So one of I'm a long time student of theosophy. And so
Oh.
I'm into the ideas of reincarnation and the fact that we live many lives. And that's kind of an inherent idea built into astrology because your natal chart, it really is a summary of your past lives. Um,
Mm.
it's 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 the level of
It's
uh,
the
of involvement you've achieved up to the time of your birth.
okay, okay, okay.
And that's one way to look at that natal chart. And I've also learned that we don't bring back all of our talents with us either. So,
Mm.
and we change race, we change gender. So um, people need to keep that in mind when they discriminate against various races and gender, because the race you're discriminating against this lifetime will be the one you may be in the next lifetime. So you can
Uh,
experience what that feels like
yeah, yeah,
and
I
learn from
get
that
that.
experience. So,
I get that. And thank you for sharing that. In the world today, we have a lot of conversations going on about race and gender identity, sexual
yes,
orientation,
that's true.
sexual expression, gender expression. And so I appreciate you sharing what you just did now about that, how one may reincarnate different gender, different race, so forth and so on. So thank you for sharing that. And what kinds of shifts in the astrological community do you think would improve opportunities for Black astrologers?
Well, certainly, I think more scholarships might be helpful because sometimes funding is an issue,
Mhm.
uh, given the fact that uh, white people in America have a 400-year head start on developing wealth.
Yes. Mhm.
You know,
Yes.
we were, slaves for a long time here, and uh, when 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 white ancestors had 400 years to help develop inherited wealth, that's quite
Mhm.
a head start. And so,
Yes.
and as you well know, uh, uh, money and finances has always been a challenge
Yes.
for us. So
Yes.
I think that might be helpful.
Okay. Okay. And I agree with you. And at Kepler College, everyone, we do offer a diversity scholarship. And anyone who is a member of any of the historically underrepresented groups, you are eligible to apply for that scholarship. And in my capacity as board chair, I invite you to apply. And also, for those who are watching this video, if you would like to donate to our Diversity Scholarship Fund, we certainly welcome that. We also offer the Maggie Nalbandian Scholarship in the name of our very first college president and founder, I'll say. And we have a scholarship in her name that is open and welcome to and available for everyone. And so would you share with us, how do you celebrate Black History Month, or do you do anything special?
Well, I will often use that as an opportunity to pick up on historical figures that I don't know as much about, because during Black History Month, there's often shows uh, or uh, or their programs uh, about various historical figures,
Mhm.
and and if there's sometimes I will attend a talk or a lecture during that period. That's about
Okay,
it. Yeah.
great, excellent. And Dr. Tiggle, I would have you to know that this interview right now with you is us celebrating Black history.
Yes, I appreciate that.
And so thank you for that. Now, tell us, of course, we know you have academic degrees. If you could tell us what the degree is and the school it was earned from,
Well,
I'd
sure.
appreciate that so that future generations of not just Black astrologers, all astrologers would know that specific information about you from this interview.
Okay. Well, at Howard, I majored in chemistry and minored in mathematics. So I have a BS in chemistry from Howard. And then I decided after undergraduate school, I decided that it would be fun to get a PhD in psychology. And that was the level of my thinking at that time, that would be
Mhm.
fun to do. I never thought about making money or anything like that.
Oh, wow.
I just thought about things that interested me. And
Mm.
so I decided to get a PhD in psychology. And of course, I didn't have any undergraduate courses in psychology.
Yeah,
So
because that's a different discipline.
it's totally different. And so my first year, I was an unclassified graduate student. So I made it my undergraduate hours. And then the second year, I got a master's at Cal State Long Beach. And then I applied to UCLA because
Mhm.
that time they were rated fifth in the country, and I was very fortunate to get into their program. So I had got a PhD in social psychology from UCLA.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'd like to share with everyone that Dr. Ronald Tiggle recently celebrated another solar return. And I knew we were
Yes.
planning this interview, so I want to say happy belated solar return to
Well,
you.
thank you,
You're welcome.
and hopefully I'll have many more.
Yes, and many more. I mean, well, I look forward to you doing more quality research moving forward, as you have done in the past, definitely. And so what kinds of services are you providing right now?
Okay, so I basically have four basic services that I do right now. of course, we do the natal chart, natal interpretation. And then we do, of course, the future trends, and that's involving both, major transits and secondary progressions and solar arcs and other techniques. And then there's the compatibility analysis between you and a partner, and also electional astrology, planning, picking the best dates to start a new venture, and also astrocartography, relocation
Oh, okay.
astrology. In fact, one of the I've been using relocation astrology as before astrocartography was invented. Because one of the ways I picked the graduate school I was going to go to was I did relocation charts across the country, and this was 1974, and at that time there was no astrocartography.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so you use that technique that we now know as astrocartography. And in California, was that a Jupiter line?
Well, the way it worked is when I relocated my chart, Aquarius was rising in California, and so my sun was on the ascendant, and my sun moon midpoint was in Los Angeles, and
Oh,
things just worked very, very well for me there.
okay, got it. Got it. Okay, excellent. And so tell us, how can people find you?
Okay, I have my website is easy to find. It's ronaldtiggle.com.
Okay, all right. Okay, so is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we conclude?
Well, it's been a pleasure to participate in this Black History Month talk today as a African American astrologer. One of the
Excellent. Excellent. And I just want to add, Ron, I look up to you as a role model for myself, from one African American man to another African American man. The fact that we both graduated from Howard University is also a part of that. Knowing,
Yes.
chemistry and what was the other, what you said, physics?
Yeah, I started off as a physics major,
Yeah,
and
yeah, right.
I
So I know you have that scientific mind and you're very smart and intelligent and all that other good stuff. And knowing that you have a PhD, and I'm following in those steps as a candidate. So thank you. At a later time, I'll be reaching out to you, and I'd actually like to serve as your Padawan, if you're familiar with the Star Wars universe, or your understudy as you do some of your research. And it would be an honor for me if I could, under your tutelage, co-write a research article about astrology and have it published in one of those scholarly journals. I would like that very much, and it would be an honor for me to just be under your tutelage. And then I promise you I'll take it forward, and anyone else who wanted to, work under me when it was my turn to, get ready to pass the torch, I'll do that, to just honor your legacy and a way to say thanks.
I appreciate that. We'll have to work on that.
We'll work on that.
There's a lot to research. As you know, the astrology is a work in progress. I tell you, one riddle that has stumped me all these years is the house system problem. I don't know how to resolve it.
Well, on social media right now, that's a very hot topic.
I know. I've been following it. I've been following it.
Yeah. So again, the inquiry, the continuous inquiry about house systems, we'll get there one day.
That's true.
So again, oh, you want to share something else?
No, that's
Okay.
probably the one big riddle that I think puzzles astrologers. We haven't solved
Yes.
that one.
Yeah, it's a big riddle. I'll tell you, very big riddle. So with that, Dr. Ron Tiggle, I thank you. And on behalf of the Board of Trustees of Kepler College, our president, Donna Young, the additional college administrators, our faculty members, and our students, again, we say thank you. Be safe, be well, and take care.
And thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Bye-bye, everyone.
Great.